Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started here, and people can just join in as they come, and there's always playback. So I'm Amanda Villaveses from Mental Health Lou, and I'm so happy to be joined today by Matthew Harris and Francis Mican, who will be talking today about how to create the love you want in your relationships. So welcome, Francis and Matthew. Thanks for joining me. Let me bring you both on so we can see your faces. Let me do a quick little intro for people to get to know who you are. I'm sorry, it's gotten dark, so I have this now I have my phone light to read to read your bios. So Matthew is a licensed marriage and family therapist and a supervisor specializing in individual, couples, family, and LGBT therapy, and he maintains a practice in Louisville. You'll notice that is a theme of our summit. He is certified in emotionally focused therapy and is an LMFT supervisor candidate. He holds degrees in psychology and sociology, as well as a master's of science in social work, with a specialization in marriage and family therapy from the University of Louisville. We joked earlier today about how every one of our panelists today are all like U of L people or graduated from U of L. So thank you, U of L, for stocking our summit. So he is also, let's see, Matthew, you have such a big, powerful bio here. He is also, in addition to being a supervisor and a therapist, he has over 20 years of experience in training as a certified yoga teacher, instructor, and educator, and is a caring and compassionate therapist whose therapeutic approach involves creating a safe and supportive atmosphere in which individuals, couples, and families can explore and address their personal life challenges. Matthew also provides practical feedback to assist clients in navigating through challenges and integrates various therapeutic methodologies and techniques to offer a highly personalized and collaborative approach for clients. With compassion and understanding, he works with each individual from where they are and helps them build on their strengths to attain the personal growth and goals they seek. So thank you. Welcome, Matthew. Thank you for joining us. And Francis Mican is one of my colleagues actually at North Star Counseling Center, who's recently joined us, and we're really, really pleased and happy to have you. She's a marriage and family therapist associate who earned a dual master's from the University of Louisville in bioethics and medical humanities, and in social work with a specialization in couple and family therapy. And like I said, she's currently a clinician at North Star Counseling Center, seeing couples, families, and individuals. So thank you both for joining. You can go ahead and unmute and get yourselves ready. And I would encourage anybody who is watching to please go ahead and, if you have a question at any point, put the question in the little Q&A box there or throw it in the chat. And at the end, I will come back on and I will read those to Francis and Matthew. And then if there's anything additional that you all want to learn, we will have playback information and we will have links to their bios and their web pages and everything like that, so you can contact them after all this is said and done. So I will let you all take over. So thanks and have fun.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks for having us. So I feel like it's probably worth starting out by saying that it is U of L that brought you into my life, Matthew. So, and I'm really excited to have this conversation with you because, so Matthew was one of my professors, somebody who I feel like I've learned a lot from. And I'm excited about this conversation because I think of you as somebody who really is so enthusiastic about working with couples. I know that you work with individuals and families as well. But yeah, I always got the impression that you were just very jazzed about working with couples. So I guess I just want to ask, what makes couples work so enticing for you? Why do you like that?
Oh my goodness, that is such a a loaded question for me,
Yes.
but I think to sum it up, the thing that's so exciting and enticing and rejuvenating even about it is just the fact that it's interesting. And it's interesting on lots of levels because if you look around, I mean, we're in relationship with everything. I mean, from our friends, our partners, our work, ourselves, we're in relationship with everything. And so working with couples, which, you know, if you look around, love is everywhere. There's always a storyline, a narrative around love. And it just fascinates me to see how couples get stuck and how they get into a rut or whatever they want to call it, and watching them transform the relationship and reshape it. And I just think it's just exciting because when you look at it in a bigger picture, you're really helping people with the foundation of many of their families and their lives and the things that matter most. And I think that is so rewarding, and nothing feels better than seeing a couple come through therapy and they're just beaming with, rejuvenation and excitement for the relationship and just feeling like, they can conquer the world together. And I think that just makes it so exciting for me.
Yeah. I feel like you painted a beautiful picture of that, but I think that there is something really beautiful about, like how partnerships can kind of be more than the sum of its parts, right? Like, so while it's one thing to see like a really powerful individual or somebody make huge progress, to see a relationship that has kind of all of this transformative power is such a privilege. So, like I say, I've always really strongly gotten that sense from you. And so I love kind of having that picture around it too. So the title of this is about creating the love that you want. And so I guess I kind of wanted to ask the question, like, do you think it's possible to create the love that people want? Can people like really have that much agency in love?
Well, absolutely. And we know that not just by anecdotal therapeutic, being therapists and getting, just experience, but all the science behind relationships. I mean, that's one of the revolutionary things that we've seen over the past several decades is we now have a science of love, where before it used to be a mystery. I mean, poets, philosophers, and you name it, musicians, I see the guitar in your background. It's like everyone writes about love and talked about it as a mystery. And now we actually have a science that's so solid that we can predict stuff in relationships and actually reshape. And that's usually the word we'll use, is reshape the bond, the emotional connection. That is the basic core of a relationship. And so yes, you can create the relationship you want. The difference is you have to know how to create it. And most of us, about half the population, got a good example of what that looks like, according to surveys and research. And about half the population sort of had an experience of what a healthy relationship or a strong, stable relationship, a secure relationship looks like, but the other half didn't. And so for a lot of people, it's about learning to discover what that looks like. But the other thing is it's wired into our nervous system, in our brains. We're wired to connect. And so on some level, we know exactly how to have and create the relationships we want. It's just we have to create an environment in which that emerges. And a lot of times in relationships, the context, the environment, whatever is going on can get in the way of that growth, that creation. So yes, you can create the love you want. You just got to know how to do it. And we do. And the thing is, now we know exactly how. And that's where therapy can be a really helpful place to start with that.
Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering starting with what stops people from being able to create that love, or maybe even some of the common problems that you see with maybe folks in your office or even in broader settings.
Yeah, well, that's a good question, because most every couple that I see, they always say we're having trouble communicating. Is usually the most common thing in the world. And what's funny is, in the back of my head, I kind of chuckle because I know it's not really communication. It's something much deeper than that. But that's the only way people can really describe it and make sense of it. So the things that people tend to come in saying communication is just, we're just not communicating well. Usually it's like what I call the big four, which is sex, money, parenting or with kids, and then sort of a mix between sort of your domestic things, chores, in-laws, just day-to-day living. Mm-hmm. And those tend to make up the big four. And the reason why those tend to be the ones that are more often the problems that people come in with is because if you think about it, if you're feeling really good about your relationship, a lot of things, you can figure things out. You can come together around parenting. You can come together to figure out finances and went with sex. But the minute things start to go into what I call just total disconnect, or you just don't feel with your partner, sex is the first thing to go, because if you don't feel safe with your partner, you're not going to want to have sex with them. If you don't feel safe, you can't talk openly about finances and kids and in-laws or, day-to-day chores. And so, what gets people stuck is really at the root, it's disconnection, which we all experience. It happens to everybody, but it's this disconnect and what happens is this disconnect is inevitable. It's just what happens is couples, when they get in this realm of disconnect where they can't seem to talk to each other in a way that brings each other closer together or whatever it is, they get stuck in these patterns or these ways of interacting. And what happens is they can't repair the disconnect. They can't reconnect. And so what ends up happening is the disconnect becomes chronic, and then the problems keep getting bigger and bigger to a point where you kind of feel hopeless and helpless because you're all alone in the relationship, even though you might have a partner in front of you, but you can't reach them. It's like you're reaching out, but there's a glass pane in front of you, and you can see each other, you can hear each other, but you can't reach and touch each other. And so it becomes this separating force that comes between you and your partner. So I think the thing that really gets in the way and gets people stuck is disconnect. And that comes from lots of different reasons, from our past to our present, even to how we view our future. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
I'm curious too, just kind of given the world that we live in, how you see kind of broader social stuff playing into this like intimate partnership communication. I'm thinking particularly of like oppressed couples, queer couples, maybe couples in interracial relationships, that kind of deal with some of that systemic stuff.
Yeah, and the thing with that, that's really an important thing to remember is that, we've got couples that fall into sort of what we would call the privileged majority, or, what have you. But people who are in sort of a minority configuration, whether that be in terms of gender or sexual identity, gender identity, to racial identity, whatever it is that makes them different. What I see a lot of is that the stuff that goes on in the world plays a role in almost exposes how well they can connect, because there's this image that I heard once, and I think it was Welsh or Celtic, I can't remember exactly, and I'll probably butcher the story, but in a nutshell, it's that basically is that we're all facing dragons in life. There's always a dragon that we're facing, and it's always going to win, which is pretty depressing in a way. But the thing that's different is that in that Welsh or Celtic folklore is that if you're standing in this dark cave and there's a dragon in front of you, that if you reach your hand out to the side, there's another hand reaching out that you touch, and that's your partner. And so you face that dragon together. And even though it still might win, that you're not alone in facing it. Mm-hmm. And even as morbid as that may seem, it's that sense of togetherness that we can face things that may, like the systemic racism that exists and things of that nature, climate change. I mean, you name whatever the issue is. Yeah. Whatever the oppression or prejudice, discrimination is, it doesn't matter. It's all of those are sort of dragons. And what happens is if we can come together, we can face those. And even though we may not change the system, we may not be able to make much movement, but the fact of having each other together and being able to turn to each other in that struggle and in that sense of upset or hurt fear, to have someone to be with us in that makes us stronger. And we know that just in just, knowing it, but then also research and science backs that up to where they've even studied people to climb a mountain. They've asked people, here, climb this hill. How tall does it look? And they had a huge, heavy backpack on them. And they said, it looks really, really high. Like it looks like it's probably 1,000 feet in the air. And this, oh my gosh, this is like huge. Mm-hmm. Then they brought in somebody who was a good friend of theirs or a partner that they were really close to. And then they had both heavy backpacks, but they were going to travel together. They said, how big does this mountain look? And they said, not that high. Yeah. So the brain's perception of these obstacles that we face in society are faced in a much easier way. We're able to handle them better. We're able to face these dragons better together because our brain looks at that and says we're not alone. Mm-hmm. And therefore the potential threat even from whatever these forces may be, we can face them. And we can get through to the next day if we have someone to reach out in the dark and find a hand reaching back for ours.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that helps answer your question or not, but that's how I view it. And I like that metaphor.
No, I think it's a lot of really important stuff to kind of mull over. And I think the way that you're talking about that really kind of makes me think like whether it's this huge social stuff or like a financial problem, that it's so much more about that sense of unity or togetherness, or that you'll reach out and there's a hand there rather than the specifics of the problem. And so when couples come in talking about communication, which, it does seem like that's the thing, that it's really so much more about maybe figuring out some of the stuff that's making it so that you don't feel like there's a hand there. In this field, we talk about process and content. Those are our fancy words for basically what are the details, and then how are the details conveyed. And it's really about how you talk about things. And people will say that a lot. They say it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Mm-hmm. It's both, but in couples, what happens is there tends to be a way of how couples face issues, problems, mm-hmm. and especially when they feel disconnected or they're feeling, not together. But when you're together, you can face this stuff, and it helps to have somebody. And we know that people that have a partner, or at least somebody that they are close to and can turn to, actually enriches their lives, helps their immune system function better, mm-hmm. even to the point of being more resilient and just more successful in life. Mm-hmm. Is just having someone. And it's all about, as you were talking, it's really, what reminded me of, it's really about security and safety. Mm-hmm. Those are the two key pieces of security and safety. You need to feel safe. And then you also need that safety to feel secure. Because if it doesn't feel stable and secure, then it puts you on edge because you don't know if it's going to be there or not. So then mm-hmm. it becomes not safe. So they kind of go hand in hand. Yeah. And so I think sometimes when I work with couples and hear concerns about communication, I think sometimes part of figuring out some of that communication stuff is really figuring out the underlying meaning, that it's not just about the finances, but that it's more, or, whatever the thing is, but it's more about that. I need to know that I'm safe. I need to know that when I reach for your hand, it's going to be here. And so I guess a question that I'll kind of toss to you is just about some of those underlying needs. You say safety, security. When you think about like what's really at the core, what's really going on behind that, what do you tend to see?
So that's been sort of the mystery for years, and now we know. And really, what it boils down to is one question with a few variations to it. Are you there for me? Mm-hmm. Can I count on you? Can I depend on you? Mm-hmm. Will you be there when I need you? And so that "Are you there for me?" question is really what we're asking our partners anytime we're just feeling disconnected and trying to reconnect. Mm-hmm. Because the thing is we're wired up as we have the brain of a mammal, and we're wired as social beings. So we're wired to connect and be in sort of tribes or communities. And so what happens underneath all of this is really we we need to know that someone's there, that hand reaching out, that image of that. So if we can have somebody that when we ask the question, are you there for me? And they say yes. And you can take it in and believe that that's true. Then that's what keeps the relationship strong. But when you ask your partner, you say, are you there for me? And their answer is no, or you get no answer, then that's when it's like, whoa, what's going on here? This doesn't feel very safe or secure, because now where's that hand? Where's my partner? And so what happens, the underlying thing is we have this need, this longing to feel secure and safe through knowing that our partner's there for us. And when we get a sense that they're not there, that's when the problems start to come up. That's when the arguments around finances or sex or kids, all that stuff comes up at that point. But what's really happening is that's a surface level way of trying to, maybe not knowingly, but to try to say, are you there for me? I don't know. And if we can maybe come together around this, then that can reassure me that we're together. Because our biggest fears is being alone, being rejected, abandoned, and alone. Universally, that's how we're wired up. If we weren't wired up that way, then we wouldn't be so driven for connection. So I hope that, I don't know if that answers your question, but really that's underlying everything. It's basically that one question, are you there for me?
Yeah.
And we need a response. Any response is better than none, but we need a response. And what that response is determines kind of what happens next.
So I guess I'm hearing kind of like a two-way street here, where like if there's concern that question, are you there for me, is going to be answered with a no, that might kind of bubble up to the surface in the form of some of those other concerns. At the same time, maybe some of those questions that we ask about sex, finances, parenting, maybe at the root of some of those questions, we're really asking the question, are you there for me? Are you in this with me? Are we solving this problem together?
Absolutely.
Okay. So what patterns do you think couples tend to get stuck in when they're asking that question, maybe not having it answered, maybe having it answered in a way that doesn't offer them that sense of connectedness they need?
Yeah, well, the interesting thing here is that we really only have a few ways we can answer that question. When we feel disconnected or we need some connection or reassurance or whatever it may be, we have a couple options. One is to turn toward our partner. The other is to turn away. And then the third is to basically do nothing, is to kind of stand still. So it's kind of move toward, move away, or stay where you are. And anything other than turning toward is going to send our brain's going to pick it up in a way that says, this is dangerous, because it's a threat to the safety and security of the relationship. So, but the thing is sometimes people will turn toward, but they'll do it in a way that's critical, or they'll do it in a way that's, aggressive, or in a way that isn't a soft way. And so you turn toward, you turn away, or you do nothing. It depends on how you do it, but really, it's the turning toward. If one partner turns to the other one turns back. Those are those hands reaching out in the dark, and then coming together in the middle. And so it's predictable. So when couples feel disconnected, they get in these negative cycles or patterns. We call them different things, but really it's sort of this thing where one person, the classic one is where one person is critical, and then the other person gets sort of defensive, like, why didn't you clean up after yourself, or whatever? Why didn't you do this? And well, I did, but I didn't, and then it's this back and forth. The more the criticism comes, the more the defensiveness kicks in. And the more this person gets defensive, the more criticism comes out of this one. And it's just going round and round and round until eventually somebody just gives up and says, I can't do anymore. I can't do that, and then they just move away. And then it's about, okay, how do they come back together? Because we all get into those. It's just a matter of, can we come back together afterwards and help each other, understand what just happened and repair what just happened. And if we can't, then we get in this sort of chronic negative pattern, negative cycle. And the more you do it, it's like digging, it's going in circles, digging a rut. And eventually you get so deep in this rut, it's hard to get back out without help. And that's where a lot of couples, that's when they end up in my office or on my computer screen anymore. But, it's like, that's when it happens, is when the rut gets too deep that they can't find their way back out, even though they want to.
Yeah. And I wonder if like sometimes it can just feel really hard for couples to change, even if they might want to do that turning towards, even if they might want to kind of change that, if it can feel like that pattern just feels so familiar, it can feel a little bit inevitable.
Yeah. And the thing is this is when I mentioned earlier about half the population kind of got a good reference point, which is basically means that about half the population saw what it's like to have a, quote, healthy relationship. And I say quote because healthy is very relative and very subjective in some ways. But for the other half, we didn't get this image, for the other half of the people, that there was no reference point. So there's nothing to aim for. We don't know what that is. Mm-hmm. And so what ends up happening is, if we don't know what to aim for, then we're just going to keep doing what we're doing. And so if you grow up in a home, and usually this happens, the way that we interact forms when we're young. So whoever was taking care of us most, and classically it's a mother, mother infant. But it's how we experience relationships early on. Like, how did whoever was caring for us, how did they interact with us? Like, the classic one that people say, is, oh, when a baby's crying, let them cry it out all night. Well, we know that's not exactly the best thing to do. And people argue, well, it worked and I turned out fine, or what? People have all kinds of reasons. But really, what happens when a little baby who has no words yet, a little bitty baby has no words, they just have their nervous system and they're upset, whatever's got them upset. And if you call out and say, help, 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 basically through their cries, and no one comes, eventually that baby's nervous system gets the message. When you're upset and distressed and need somebody and you call out for help, help doesn't come. Mm-hmm. And so you learn to take care of yourself and not, I don't need anybody. I don't need anyone to take care of me. And then there's the people the kid that cries out, and sometimes parents come in and comfort them, help them calm down. Sometimes they don't. So it's kind of, are you going to come or not? I don't know. Mm-hmm. And so this is where the baby tends to, be very amped up, very anxious, very almost like, maybe if I get louder, you'll come this time. And so really, for the people who have people that they come consistently, pretty much every time, and not that parents don't goof it up. We actually know that parents get it wrong about 70% of the time. And as partners, we do too. So it's not a matter of getting it right every time. It's that when you don't get it right, you repair what you got wrong. Mm. And so the repair is the key. So baby's crying and you pick the kid up and you think, they need a bottle, and then, oh, they just need their diaper changed, and you repair, you fix that. Then that's fine. It's what we call good enough parenting. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of the same. It's like, we don't have to be perfect partners. We just need to be good enough partners. Strive to be better, but to do good enough. So in a relationship, romantic relationship, it could look like you're having a stressful day. You don't really know if you're going to get laid off at your job, and you're just really upset, and you're saying, oh my God, I don't know if I'm going to get laid off. I'm really stressed. What are we going to do for money? Mm-hmm. And if the partner ignores you, which is not attending to the baby crying, what's going to happen? You're going to start realizing this is stupid. Why you're not there for me? Are you there for me? Mm-hmm. No. So I got to take care of myself, which comes with usually shutting down, numb out the feelings, push them down, sometimes using alcohol or whatever, something to do it. Mm-hmm. But if a partner sometimes turns and says, oh, it'll be all right, you come here, let me hold you, and other times not, then the are you there for me question is sometimes yes and sometimes no answer. So it's like, mm-hmm. maybe if I get louder, you'll respond. And but what we're aiming for is that when we turn to our partner and say, oh my God, I'm just so overwhelmed and scared about this, that our partner turns and says, sweetie, oh my God, I know you're scared. It's going to be okay. I'm here with you. We'll figure it out. Yeah. And they hold them or do whatever it is. And that's what we're aiming for. And it's when we don't do that, we get stuck in these patterns. And then it gets to a point where, we start giving up and
Mm.
trying. And then that's when we start to grieve it.
Yeah, not even reaching out to ask, are you there for me? But, and so I just want to clarify, when you say turning towards, I get the sense that you very much can mean that literally, like I will literally put my hand out here for you, offer you that sense of connection and comfort. But you also mean that metaphorically in terms of, that language around like, no, I've got you. We've got this. We're in this together.
Yeah, and I like, I think turn toward, I also like the word saying, reaching for your partner. Mm-hmm. And that can it could be sending a text, which I'm not a huge fan of texting, but text can be. It could be a phone call. It could be physical reaching out. And then because we're adults, we have this special ability that kids don't have, which is we can carry our partner in our head, which sounds like, what is that? But what it is we can hear our partner's voice. Like, what would our partner say, if, you're really upset, and they're not there, and you can't call them. Like, just hearing their voice in your head, actually, it's like an antidote to your nervous system and the anxiety and the fear and the worry. It'll just calm you right down, because it releases hormones that shut off the fear. And that happens with mother, parent, whatever, child, and with partners. We're no different, really. From cradle to grave, we're no different than mothers and fathers with their kids. We're the same. We have the same needs. It just look a little different.
Yeah, I really like that about kind of being able to carry your partner with you in your head. And I think maybe part of what I'm hearing there is you might need to kind of be able to imagine that they would say, like, oh yeah, we're going to get through this. We've got this. We're in this together. So kind of like building that reserve of support, really. So I'm wondering, knowing that couples do often get stuck in these patterns that can be really deeply ingrained, it can feel really familiar, even like from prior to our ability to form memory. What do you think happens in therapy that helps couples work through this?
Well, that's a wonderful question, because a lot of people look at therapy and think, oh God, couple therapy is going to make it worse. And in some cases it can, if the therapist doesn't have a clue what they're doing, which is what happened for many, many, many years, is we didn't know. But now we do. And so now we have a map for it. We kind of we know how it works. We know how to create change in therapy. And there's lots of research in science to show us how that happens. And so what happens in therapy is in a nutshell, is couples start to look at this pattern, this cycle they get stuck in, and be able to see it, like really get to know what it is. How does it play out in their relationship? How does it, what sets it off, and how does it go play by play when they get stuck in it? And first off, couples, then they start to figure out, once they know what to look for, they can start coming together to fight this thing off. Like, this is like this outside force coming in, and they fight off this cycle. They try to keep it from taking over their relationship. And then once they get a pretty good handle on that, that's not the end of it, but things get a little better, and there's not so much negative. But then a lot of therapies, a lot of therapy models or the treatments or approaches or therapists even in general stop there. And couples will even drop out at that point. We feel better. We're not arguing so much. But that doesn't change anything. That just makes them nicer to each other. So what happens is you see them back in the office, a few months later, because they relapse. So what ends up happening is, once you get a handle on this negative cycle, then what you do is the core of it is going to the heart of the matter and reshaping their bond. They're basically restructuring the relationship to where that question, are you there for me, is a solid, resounding yes, as opposed to, I'm not sure, I need to think about it, I need some time, or silence. And there's usually good reason why, when people don't get the yes, why they're not getting the yes. For people who say nothing at all, the ones that just kind of sit there and look like deer in the headlights, if you were to hook them up to a bunch of equipment, you'd see their heart rate's through the roof. They're panicking. They're just not showing it. And the person who's like looking, quote, needy, or looking looking very critical, they're just basically trying to cling on and say, don't go, I need you, I need you. They're basically doing a protest. But it looks very scary to the other person. And so what you do in this, once you get a hang of this, cycle thing, is you help each partner really look at what they're afraid of. Like, what is it that you're really afraid of? And what it boils down for everybody is, I'm afraid to be rejected and abandoned and end up alone. How that happens is different for other people, whether it's because I'm unworthy or I'm not good enough, or all the different things people can say. But what changes in therapy, at least with the therapy I do, which has been now shown to be like the gold standard of therapy, emotionally focused therapy, we call it EFT for short, is that once you get that handle on the negative pattern, then you start to ask that question and share that. And what happens is we have these bonding moments where they're able to have an experience in the session that is so powerful that we've been able to study it and see that when you can talk to your partner in a soft way that draws them in and helps them understand what your fear is, and for you to be able to ask for what you need, and for them to turn back and respond. So you reach for them, they reach back in with a response. Then what it does is it actually updates or revises your brain's memory and reshapes it. So then what happens is it sort of updates the file on what relationships, the experience you have with your partner is like, and with other people even. It can be so powerful, to where the more that they have those kind of conversations, it just heals the wounds from the inside out.
Yeah. So again, kind of like creating that knowledge of, I can ask this question that might feel really scary to ask. Are you really here for me? Are you really going to be there when I turn to you in a tough moment? And really getting that resounding yes, knowing that you'll get that resounding yes. So a question kind of to follow that is, sometimes I see individuals who, want to work on their relationship in individual work, or couples who want to work on their relationship, kind of figure out some of these patterns, work on this stuff outside of therapy. What are your thoughts around that?
I think, and this is maybe just my opinion alert here, but whatever gets them in the door to look at what's going on, because yes, for couple therapy is like the preferred way to work on relationship issues, because if issues are happening in a relationship, they're, what other place is there, where else can you work on it but in the relationship? But people sometimes just come in on their own because either a partner is not willing, or they're, just dating someone, and it's like, I don't want to bring someone in after I've been dating them for a couple of months. There's different reasons. It can, you can do it in many formats. You can do it. What I'm talking about with all this is, it's not just the love you want in romantic relationships. You can create it with families. You can create it on your own as well. Because the really interesting thing about us is, and what we know now, we're knowing more and more through research and science around this, is it doesn't matter. I mean, yes, the couple in the room, that would be the ideal. But if you're working with one person, healing can there can be just as much healing taking place there, or in families with a family therapy. But yeah, with couples that come in, I always say it's better if you can have a couple come in. But if it's just one person, you can still work on it. You can still figure these things out. It may look a little different on how you do it, obviously, but I think whatever helps you have a more secure relationship, or at least a relationship where when you ask, are you there for me, that the answer is yes. That makes us better people in general. I mean, all the research on this shows we're actually much more successful in all kinds of realms, not only just our mental health, but our physical health. Our immune system actually goes up. So one of the interesting things right now in a pandemic is that if we have a solid, secure relationship, it boosts our immune system. It helps us be more resilient to this, for this virus, But what we also know is, if we're having a lot of disconnect and we're not feeling connected to our partner, it tanks our immune system. It actually bottoms it out. We're more susceptible to illness. So it just ups our risk, chance for being ill.
Yeah.
So So yeah, I mean, individual or couple, I don't think it matters. I think, whatever way helps you get in the door and start working on it, that's fine. Do what you
Yeah.
can do.
And what about outside of therapy? Do you think couples can kind of figure out these patterns outside of working with somebody who's really good at working with couples?
Well, yeah, I see, the interesting thing about this is, we all know how to do this in some way. It's in our DNA. It's in our bones, our nervous system. I mean, it's in our nature to want to connect. And so what happens is it helps to have somebody that knows it's like we've got the map, we have a map, and then we're helping them on their journey. But that doesn't mean that people can't find their way on their own. It just might take longer. It might be more difficult.
Yeah.
Now, especially if there's things like trauma in somebody's history or their past, or anything that, or if there's been even an infidelity in the relationship or something that happens, that can be a problem too. And so, there's different things that can happen, but yeah.
Yeah. And I like that about having the roadmap. It's still the same terrain that's going to be explored. It just might be that somebody can kind of help you maybe even scale back and see that terrain. And so I'm glad that you brought up this concern that couples sometimes have, that if we go see a therapist, we're going to just make this worse. I think for some, and this is in my experience, I don't know if you'll have seen this as well, but I think sometimes people get to a place of awareness where they start to see these patterns, whether it's in their relationship or stuff that's going on, in their own individual brain with their thinking or whatever. And that place of awareness without change yet can feel really hard for some people to be in that, we're on our way. And so I wonder, I don't know. I just think that can be a big concern for people. Are we actually going to make progress? And so something that I try to remember to tell people often is that, change takes a lot of trial and error, and it requires getting things wrong sometimes. Maybe there's somebody out in the world who makes change without ever making a misstep, but I don't necessarily buy that. So I think that's one of the myths or kind of misconceptions that I see of somebody will just tell me what to do differently, and no more arguments, everything's going to be fixed, which I think we know that it's not quite that simple. But I'm wondering if you see kind of misconceptions like that, or maybe other misconceptions that maybe stop people from coming in the door or have them leave a little bit quicker than might be ideal.
Yeah, well, one of the things I hear a lot of times is, now it depends on the therapist and what approach they're using. It's just like if you think in medicine, people have different approaches to treating, a certain illness. And while there may be, a general consensus about certain things, but there can be variations. So I think it depends on the therapist. So one, it has to be a good fit. So if if the therapist and the couple, they're not a good fit for each other, then that's going to cause issues. But some myths are that, the therapist is going to side with one person over the other. Quote, good therapists would never do that because they're not going to take sides and blame one person. But I hear all the time people say that happened before they come to my office. They've been in therapy before at some point. And I just chalk that up to people not knowing the map, not knowing the science and how this works. And so some of the misconceptions are that there's going to be, taking sides, or you're going to go in and you're just going to be taught skills, which some people do. But the thing is when you're all caught in this cycle and your emotions are on they're heated, all those skills, you can learn everything. You could learn everything you can, be the skill master on everything, communication. And the minute you get heated, your emotions go up to a certain level, the skills go out the door, and you don't have a clue. You can't remember it. If your feet, you're hanging off the edge of the Grand Canyon, your toes are hanging off, the wind's blowing, and I'm saying, recite to me this poetry, or whatever. You're not thinking about in those moments, those skills and things that whatever it is, you're not going to think. All you're really worried in those moments is don't fall, don't get pushed over. Safety. And in relationship, it's the same thing. All these skills, these I statements, say I feel, or this or that, those are lovely, but they fall right out the window the minute you hit a bump and emotion takes over. And emotion's not irrational, but it's necessary. It's a messenger. So I think, some of the misconceptions are you're gonna, it's gonna be taking sides, or people are gonna prescribe stuff, and they might, but I think people thinking it's gonna be worse. It can get worse before it gets better. I usually say it's not always unicorns and rainbows. Not every session is going to be that way. It takes effort, but if the relationship matters to you, then the investment, I mean, you think about it, how much time do you invest in how you look each day? Or how much do you invest in your work, your education? How valuable is your relationship? And so, I think in general, it's typically like an hour a week or an hour every 2 weeks. It's like, can you afford that, like that time to invest, and then the time in between? So I don't know, there's lots of misconceptions, but I think people are scared because they don't know what's going to happen. They don't know what they're going to get. And so I think that's where finding a therapist that you sort of click with and you feel safe with is the first prerequisite.
Yeah. Well, and I think maybe you're one of the people who said this, but I think in ideal couples work, the relationship is the client, not either person. But it's that relationship that's your focus rather than, taking sides or, saying like, oh, well, it looks like you're causing all these problems. I don't think any good couples therapist is going to point fingers or, even kind of imbalance things to a strong degree. So if somebody was trying to figure out if a therapist was a good fit for them, what would you recommend that they do or ask, or how would you encourage people to find the right therapist?
It's a really good question. And the answer, it could be different things. It could be, having a phone call with the therapist for, 5 minutes. I mean, you're not going to learn everything, but you get a feel for them. A lot of times now, though, therapists tend to do just through email or text because just it's easier than phone tag. But I think the thing is really look in when you do your research on a therapist and look into them, find out what their training is, and I'm of course biased to EFT because it's the gold standard, but there are other methods out there. But, figuring out what training do they have. Some people who do couple therapy have never been trained. Like you and I have been trained in couple and family therapy. We've got training and supervision and hours of it. It's really probably in the field, we're probably the most trained in that regard. And you get someone who's, let's say just a regular counselor or a regular, like a licensed psychologist. A lot of times they've had no training in couples at all or families. And so for them to offer that, unless they get the training, they wouldn't really know what they're doing. So I think the first thing is finding someone who knows what they're doing by the fact that they've been trained. And then I say give it 3 sessions. And if you don't click by then, ask for, a referral to somebody else saying, I don't, and being honest and saying, I just don't feel like we're a good fit. We're a good fit for each other. And I'll say that with couples, if that's the case. I won't lie to them and pretend, but, that's usually the way I would say do is just look into them, reach out to them. You usually get a vibe with people if you feel like, you feel comfortable with. And usually after a session or 2, you get a good idea whether or not you feel good, safe in the office or on the computer or whatever it is at this point. But yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you bring up the word safety too, because I think for myself as a therapist, that's such an important piece for me is, and maybe a myth that I kind of want to like bust really quickly is just that I think a good therapist, whether it's with an individual or with a couple or with a family, is really going to move at a pace that feels safe and feels good, because we don't want to like make that question of, am I safe? Am I secure? We don't want to make that worse. We don't want to kind of find a tender spot and poke it. That's not exactly our goal. Particularly while we're still getting to learn about new folks that we're working with or getting to understand a couple. I don't think a good couples therapist is going to be in a real rush or pushing too fast.
Yeah, or any therapist for that matter, because the thing about safety is we can create safety. We can create, try to create it, but really all we can do is create an environment in which safety arises, basically.
Yeah.
Is we could, and a lot of that is things that you do. It could be just from the way you even have your office set up to the way you talk to people. But then there's also the safety that comes from learning what helps the people in front of you, the couple in front of you. What helps them feel safe? Is it, especially if they're from a minority group of any type, some group that's not, that's sort of it could be either oppressed or they've had experienced discrimination. I've had lots of LGBT couples that come in and say, we've been to therapists before, and they basically judged us for our sexual identity or whatnot. And so being able to address these different aspects of people's selves and being open and be able to talk about that and have that as a part of the therapy, not as a core issue, but as a part of who they are. And that creates a sense of safety when you let them be part of the process, as opposed to you sort of doing it to them. And that's a misconception too of therapy, is that you're going to go in and be psychoanalyzed, like the couches. And so we got rid of those lay down couches a long time ago. Now it's more chairs, and there's still couches, but you're sitting up. But yeah, so I mean, you just have to be open. And I say give it 3 sessions. I always say with anybody, give it 3 sessions and then make your decision. Because it's hard to sort of make a true judgment call after just one.
Yeah. So I guess kind of recognizing our time and that people might have questions. I guess when I think about the answer to the question, like, can you create the love you want, or how do we create the love we want? What I'm hearing is that sometimes we have to figure out like what's really at the root of anything that's shaking our sense of security, our sense of certainty that we can have love, that we can have a relationship that's fulfilling. And that when we, maybe we and our partner, or even just, one person, when we start to really question some of those deep-seated issues, again, kind of that two-way street where maybe some of the little stuff stops bubbling up quite so frantically. And maybe when those little things do bubble up, we have this really secure foundation to work from. So another thing that I'm hearing is, we can absolutely get support in creating the love that we want, from people who have training in this, from doing work on our own. But that finding somebody who can help us figure out that map a little bit can really offer support in being able to create the love that we want.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the thing to always remember is I don't know if I heard this or what, or I thought it, I don't remember, but I think I heard before, love is a verb. And it's meaning that it's an action. It's, just like self-esteem is a verb. To create the love you want, you have to actively do it. It's an active participation, an active involvement. You're engaged in it. And that's the thing with that question, are you there for me? There's an acronym, ARE, for are you there? Are you there? And it stands for being accessible, responsive, and engaged on an emotional level, meaning that when I say, are you there for me? You're accessible to me. Like I can reach you, you're going to respond, and you're going to be engaged. And that is really the antidote. That is how you create this love you want, is that when you have these cycles, when you have all these things go wrong, the way that you ask and the way that you answer that question, are you there for me, is by being accessible and responsive and engaged. And all that really looks like is just being soft and being receptive and responsive and just really feeling like, I get it. I understand what you're going through, and being curious to get it, and then being able to respond and say, what do you need? How can I help?
Yeah. And I hear that so much as a two-way street that we can be, we can create the space where our partner knows they can ask that question, are you there for me? And we can also create kind of that, again, we can turn towards our partners and we can ask them, we can be brave enough to ask them to turn towards us sometimes.
It takes a lot of courage. It does. It takes, courage is not the absence of fear, but it's what we do in the face of it. And so when you take that risk to be vulnerable, that is the most courageous thing in the world to do. And a lot of people see that as a weakness. Really, it's actually a huge strength.
Yeah.
I'm going to pop back on so you all can answer a question here from the chat, which is, when do you know when you need to call it quits or take a break because couples counseling isn't resolving deeper traumas like infidelity, past physical altercations, rooted in hurt for 6 years?
Well, that is a wonderful question, and I will make it as simplistic as possible. The way I look at it is when it comes to when you're working in couple therapy, if it doesn't feel safe, if you don't feel safe on at least a baseline sense of safety with your partner in the session, if there's not a sense of safety in the sessions, then you might need to have a conversation with the therapist about that. I rarely ever suggest that you call it quits unless there's some sort of like, in the question, there's talking about physical altercations. If that's happening now, then pausing it and working on doing individual therapy. If there's trauma, infidelities, sometimes there needs to be individual therapy in addition to couple work. Because the couple, remember, like you said, Frances, lovely, the relationship is who we're working, that's what we're trying to heal. And when one part of that relationship, that one person has a lot of stuff that's, really challenging, sometimes they need a little more focused help by one individual therapy, in addition to not stopping necessarily the couple work. But I think the biggest thing with this is if you don't feel like it's going anywhere, like it's not helping, then have a conversation with the therapist. And it might mean it's not the right fit or the right approach. There's lots of variables to it. But I think the biggest thing is just being open and honest about that with the therapist, especially if you're not able to do it with your partner. I think that's the big key to keep in mind there. So I hope that answers your question.
I think it's a good answer there. And I think that was if anybody has a question as we're closing out, please feel free to send it. But I want to hop on and say thanks to both of you. I think this has been a wonderful discussion. Probably or hopefully has brought to people a little more insight into, how to really have, like you said, how to create that love you want, how to have stronger relationships, maybe give them some insight and inspire them to do some of their own work. I would like to, I think we have one more. Let me look here real quick. Oh, it just says, thank you so much. That was extremely helpful.
Oh, wonderful.
So let me ask you both real quick. Is there anything you'd like to share? Are you currently taking clients? Do you have a wait list? Are you, looking for fans? What are you all up for?
So no, I'm taking on new people depending on schedule wise with my schedule, teaching and whatnot. So if it fits with my schedule, then yes, I am. So if people can reach me through my website, I think you might be posting that with it, but it's Matthew Harris, MFT.com. It's just my name, MFT.com. Or you can Google me, you can find me. But if you need to reach out for anything, you can reach me. And one thing I wanted to mention, I think I'd sent some handouts, a couple of little handouts people can do so that you can look at your cycle. Another thing is there's a book called Hold Me Tight. That's a really good book by Dr. Sue Johnson. I would recommend that for people if they want to get started on looking at this without going into therapy, if they wanted to look into a little bit deeper or whatnot. So those would be my recommendations there. But yeah,
and we're going to put those handouts, we'll put them up on our website and we'll email them out to all the people who are attending and participants so that they can have them. So thank you for adding that.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And Frances, how about you?
Yeah, so I currently have some availability. My schedule is a little bit in flux. But yeah, you can find me on the North Star website or Frances at northstarcounselingcenter.com is my email address for people who want to get a hold of me. I think, the biggest thing that I kind of want to push is just going back to what we talked about before, that change really is possible, that, a question like, can I create something that I want in my life? I think it really is so possible. And as a therapist, it's such a privilege to be really kind of on the outskirts, but to have any piece in seeing, witnessing that journey, those changes, whether it's with a couple, an individual, a family. It's just such a cool experience to see people answer this question of, okay, I guess I can create what I want in my life. And here are some ways that I'm going to do it. Kind of like Matthew was saying, I don't think it's about giving the skills or tips to figure that out, but really walking with people in that process is a really special thing. So thanks for having us here tonight. It's so great to have this conversation. Like I say, I've learned so much from you, Matthew, over the years. And so it's great to continue that.
Thank all of you for this. Yeah, this was very lovely, and I learned just as much from you, Francis, and all students and everyone else, just as much as hopefully you learned something from me. So I feel very honored and privileged to be asked to talk about something I love so dearly. So thank you so much for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you both very much. And if anybody does want to find out a little bit more about you, and they can, like you said, they can Google you. They're also on our website under our speakers. We have your photo. You can click on the photo and it'll take you to the website and help people locate. And then I'll also put up those handouts. And we'll have all of this on our YouTube page coming up this week, along with a audio version of it on the SantaMind app. So people will be able to access this and listen again and again, so they can kind of like really get this information down and practice and learn it and email you and ask more questions. So awesome. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And for the attendees, thank you for coming. We will be doing this again tomorrow, starting at 9 a.m. with a meditation from Nicole Bartlett of the Louisville Salt Cave. So thank you. Have a good evening.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.